something loosen in my chest. A tension I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it was there. Destiny was safe now, legally protected. No matter what Kayla did, she couldn't just take her back. The judge wasn't finished. She ordered Kayla to repay all fraudulent government benefits within 6 months or face additional legal action. Then she said she was referring the crowdfunding fraud to the prosecutor's office for review of potential criminal charges. Kayla's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fresh panic. She started to say something, but the judge cut her off, saying the court had no discretion in cases of potential fraud. Rita squeezed my hand under the table. I wanted to feel bad for Kayla, wanted to feel guilty about what was happening to her, but mostly I just felt tired and relieved. She'd done this to herself. Every choice, every lie, every time she blamed me instead of taking responsibility. This was the consequence she'd been avoiding for almost 2 years. Kayla looked at me across the courtroom and I saw anger there now, cutting through the tears. She thought I'd betrayed her, thought I'd destroyed her life on purpose. She didn't understand that I'd just stopped letting her destroy mine. The hearing ended and everyone stood as the judge left through her private door. The moment she was gone, Kayla came at me across the courtroom, her voice rising to a scream before she even reached my side of the room. She shouted that I'd ruined everything, that I'd stolen her daughter, that I was a vindictive witch who'd planned this whole thing. Rita stepped between us immediately, positioning herself so Kayla had to stop or physically push through her. Rita's voice stayed calm but firm as she told Kayla that this behavior was exactly why she'd lost custody, that she needed to leave before she made things worse for herself. The bailiff moved closer, his hand resting on his belt in a way that made his readiness clear. Kayla kept screaming over Rita's shoulder, calling me names I won't repeat, saying things about my life and my choices that cut even though I knew they came from her pain. Other people in the courtroom were staring now. A clerk paused in gathering papers to watch. Rita told Kayla one more time to leave or the bailiff would remove her. Kayla finally stepped back, her chest heaving, her face red and blotchy from crying. She pointed at me and said this wasn't over, that I hadn't won anything. Then she turned and shoved through the courtroom doors hard enough that they banged against the walls. I picked Destiny up from the daycare attached to the courthouse where she'd been playing during the hearing. She reached for me immediately, her little arms wrapping around my neck. The drive home took 20 minutes and she fussed in her car seat the whole way, sensing something was different even if she didn't understand what. Back at our apartment, I made her lunch while she clung to my leg, not wanting to let me out of her sight. She picked up her food, eating maybe half before pushing the plate away. I carried her to her room for nap time and she fought it at first, crying and calling for Mama in a way that made my heart hurt. But I held her and rocked her and sang the song she liked, and eventually her eyes got heavy. She fell asleep with her hand fisted in my shirt, making sure I couldn't leave without her knowing. I sat there on the floor next to her crib watching her breathe, watching her face relax into peaceful sleep. The weight of what had just happened settled over me like a physical thing. I wasn't just her aunt anymore, wasn't just helping out temporarily. I was her legal guardian now, responsible for everything, every decision, every problem. Every need she had was mine to meet. She was 2 years old and I was 24, and this was my life now. That evening after Destiny woke up from her nap and I fed her dinner and given her a bath, my phone rang. Raina's name showed on the screen. I answered while Destiny played with blocks on the living room floor. Raina said she'd heard about the hearing from my mother, said she was proud of me for standing up for Destiny when nobody else would. She offered to help with childcare when I had classes, said she had flexible hours at her job and could watch Destiny a few times a week if I needed. I thanked her, feeling tears prick at my eyes from the kindness after such a hard day. Then Raina said something that made me freeze. She admitted the family had known for months that Kayla was taking advantage of me. They'd all seen it happening, seen me struggling, seen Kayla partying while I raised her baby. But nobody wanted to get involved in the drama, didn't want to pick sides, didn't want to make things awkward at family gatherings. They just watched and stayed quiet while I drowned. Raina apologized, said she should have spoken up sooner, should have offered help before it got this bad. I told her it was okay, even though it wasn't really, even though knowing they'd all just watched hurt almost as much as everything Kayla had done. But I needed the help now more than I needed to hold a grudge. Destiny threw a block and laughed, oblivious to the adult conversation happening over her head. I told Raina I'd take her up on the childcare offer, and we made plans for her to come by next week. 2 days after the hearing, my phone rang while I was giving Destiny lunch. The caller ID showed a county number I didn't recognize. A woman introduced herself as someone from the prosecutor's office working on benefit fraud cases. She needed me to come in and give a formal statement about Kayla using my information without permission to apply for government assistance. I felt my stomach drop, even though she explained right away that I wasn't in trouble. She said I was the victim of identity and they needed my statement to build the case against Kayla. I scheduled an appointment for the following afternoon and spent the rest of the day feeling sick. My sister could actually face criminal charges because of what she'd done. Part of me felt guilty for starting all this, even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. Kayla had stolen from the government using my name and address. She committed fraud, but she was still my sister, and the idea of her going to jail made me want to throw up. My phone started blowing up that evening with texts from Kayla. The first few were apologies saying she was sorry and didn't mean for things to go this far. Then they shifted to accusations claiming I was destroying her life over a misunderstanding. She said I was being vindictive and trying to punish her for past mistakes. She texted that I'd always been jealous of her, and this was my chance to ruin everything for her. I watched the messages come in one after another, my phone buzzing constantly on the coffee table while Destiny played with her blocks. Some texts begged me to call the prosecutor and tell them it was all a mistake. Others called me horrible names and said I was a terrible sister who never cared about family. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to Rhea. She called me within minutes and told me to stop responding completely. She said to document every single message but don't engage at all. Kayla was spiraling, and anything I said could be twisted and used against me in the ongoing custody evaluation. I muted Kayla's number and tried to focus on getting Destiny ready for bed. The first supervised visitation was scheduled for Thursday afternoon at the Family Services Center downtown. I dressed Destiny in the outfit Kayla had bought her months ago, hoping it might help. We arrived 15 minutes early and checked in at the front desk. The waiting room had worn carpet and plastic chairs bolted to the floor. Destiny sat on my lap playing with a stuffed animal while we waited. And waited. 20 minutes past the scheduled time, Kayla still hadn't shown up. 30 minutes. 40 minutes. I was about to ask the receptionist what to do when Kayla finally walked through the door. She looked terrible. Her hair was greasy and pulled back in a messy bun. Her clothes looked slept in. She smelled like she hadn't showered in days, a mix of stale cigarettes and body odor that made me want to move away from her. The supervisor, a woman who introduced herself as Nicolette, led us back to a small room with toys and a table. Kayla reached for Destiny immediately, but Destiny started crying and reaching back for me. I saw something break in Kayla's face, a crack in whatever armor she'd been wearing. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back and tried to smile at Destiny. Nicolette suggested Kayla sit on the floor and let Destiny come to her when ready. Kayla sat down hard and pulled out her phone while Destiny clung to my leg. Nicolette sat in the corner with a clipboard taking notes. I watched her write things down every few minutes, her pen moving steadily across the page. Kayla tried to get Destiny interested in toys, but she didn't know which ones Destiny liked. She held up a doll and Destiny shook her head. She offered blocks and Destiny ignored them. When Destiny finally did start playing, she stayed near me, occasionally looking back to make sure I was still there. Kayla spent most of the hour scrolling on her phone, glancing up every so often to see what Destiny was doing. She tried to pick Destiny up once, and Destiny screamed so loud that Nicolette had to intervene. Kayla's hands were shaking when she set Destiny back down. The whole visit felt wrong and sad, and I hated every minute of it. When the hour was up, Destiny practically threw herself at me and buried her face in my shoulder. Kayla stood there watching us leave, her arms hanging at her sides, looking more lost than I'd ever seen her. Nicolette called me 3 days later and asked if I could come in for a home evaluation. She showed up at my apartment the following Tuesday with a thick folder and a measuring tape. She walked through every room, opening cabinets, checking the smoke detectors, measuring the space in Destiny's bedroom. She asked about our daily routine, what time Destiny woke up, what she ate for breakfast, when she napped, what we did in the evenings. She wanted to see my childcare arrangements, and I showed her the schedule I'd worked out with the daycare near my work. She asked about my finances, and I pulled out my budget spreadsheet showing exactly where every dollar went. She looked at the receipts I'd kept for baby supplies, the documentation of every expense related to Destiny's care. She seemed impressed by how organized everything was despite my tiny apartment and limited income. She made notes constantly, her handwriting small and neat, filling page after page in her folder. Nicolette asked about my plans for the future, and I felt my throat get tight. I admitted I had to drop down to part-time at community college because I couldn't afford both tuition and childcare. My original plan had been to finish my degree this year and start looking for better jobs. Now I was taking 1 or 2 classes per semester when I could squeeze them in around work and taking care of Destiny. Nicolette nodded and wrote something in her folder that took several lines. She said it showed my commitment to putting Destiny's needs first, even when it meant sacrificing my own goals. I felt tears prick my eyes because it was true, but it also hurt to say out loud. My whole life had changed, and there was no going back to what I planned. Nicolette spent another hour going through emergency procedures, asking about my support system, reviewing Destiny's medical records. When she finally left, I felt exhausted and exposed, like she'd seen every corner of my life and found it barely adequate. Kayla started posting on social media again a few days later. I saw the first post when my friend sent me a screenshot asking if I was okay. Kayla had written a long story about how I'd manipulated the court system and stolen her baby through lies and fake evidence. She said I'd always been jealous of her and couldn't stand seeing her happy. She claimed I'd made up stories about her being a bad mother because I wanted Destiny for myself. The post had dozens of comments from people who didn't know the real story, all saying how terrible I was and how sorry they felt for Kayla. She posted again the next day with more accusations, each one more twisted than the last. She said I forged documents and paid people to lie in court. She said the judge was biased because Rita knew someone in the courthouse. She built this whole narrative where she was the innocent victim, and I was some kind of villain who orchestrated everything out of spite. I watched people believe her version of events and felt powerless to do anything about it. My mother called that weekend. I saw her name on my phone and almost didn't answer, but I picked up on the fourth ring. She said she'd seen Kayla's posts and wanted to know my side of the story. Then she asked if I really had to take things this far instead of working it out as a family. I felt anger rise up in my chest, hot and fast. I reminded her that she'd kicked Kayla out when she got pregnant and had barely seen Destiny since she was born. I said she didn't get to question my choices when she'd made it clear she wanted nothing to do with the situation. She went quiet for a long moment. Then she changed the subject to ask how Destiny was doing, and if I needed anything. I told her we were fine and got off the phone as quickly as I could. My hands were shaking when I set my phone down. I was so tired of everyone having opinions about what I should do while offering no actual help. Rita called me that evening after seeing Kayla's post. She told me to make all my social media accounts private immediately, and not to respond to any of Kayla's accusations online. She explained that anything I said publicly can be taken out of context and used against me in court. The best thing I could do was stay silent and let the evidence speak for itself. I followed her advice even though it killed me to watch people believe Kayla's lies. I wanted to defend myself, to tell everyone the truth about what had really happened. But I kept my mouth shut and made my accounts private, and watched my sister spin her story to anyone who would listen. It felt like losing even when I knew I was doing the right thing. The second supervised visit happened 2 weeks later. I brought Destiny to the Family Services Center expecting another awkward hour like the first time. But when we walked into the waiting room, Kayla was already there with a guy I'd never seen before. He had his arm around her shoulders and she was laughing at something he said. When she saw us, she jumped up and pulled the guy over. She introduced him as Lucas and told Destiny he was going to be her new daddy. Destiny hid behind my legs while Lucas tried to high-five her. The supervisor came out and immediately asked who Lucas was. Kayla said he was her boyfriend and she wanted him to meet Destiny during the visit. Nicolette's expression went hard and she separated them, explaining that only Kayla was approved for visitation. Kayla started arguing that Lucas was going to be part of Destiny's life, so he needed to be involved now. Nicolette repeated that the court order specified supervised visits for Kayla only, and if she couldn't follow that rule, the visit would be canceled. Lucas looked uncomfortable and said he'd wait in the car. Kayla shot me a look like this was somehow my fault, before following Nicolette back to the visitation room. I waited in the car while the visit finished, watching through the window as Kayla tried to get Destiny to play with blocks. Destiny kept looking toward the door where I'd left, and Kayla's frustration showed in how roughly she stacked the blocks. When the hour ended, Nicolette walked them out and gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Destiny ran to me and wrapped her arms around my legs, burying her face against my jeans. Kayla stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, watching us with an expression I couldn't read. I buckled Destiny into her car seat and drove home without looking back. Nicolette called me that evening after I put Destiny to bed. She asked if we could talk about what she observed during the visit, and I settled onto my couch with a knot forming in my stomach. She said Kayla's behavior with the boyfriend showed concerning judgment about appropriate boundaries, especially bringing someone new around Destiny without proper introduction or approval. I agreed, remembering how uncomfortable the whole situation had felt. Then Nicolette asked if Kayla had a history of rushing into relationships, and I told her about Tony and how that had ended. I mentioned the 2 other serious boyfriends Kayla had introduced to Destiny in the past year, guys who'd been around for a few weeks before disappearing. Nicolette went quiet for a moment, and said she'd be noting this pattern in her evaluation. She thanked me for being honest and said she'd be in touch soon. 3 days later, Rita called with news that made my hands shake. The prosecutor had filed formal charges against Kayla for benefit fraud and theft by deception related to the crowdfunding campaign. Rita explained that the evidence I provided had been strong enough to warrant criminal prosecution, not just civil penalties. I felt sick even though I knew this was a natural consequence of Kayla's choices. That night, my phone rang at almost midnight. Kayla's name flashed on the screen and I almost didn't answer, but something hard I could barely understand.